What's up, YouTubers? This is Max here with your Week 11 warm up. We're going to be talking about different kind of polling. We can call them tactics almost if we're taking the role of an evil poller, right? These are different tactics or biases, really, that can skew the results of polls. So, we think that polls are tracking um, real phenomena, but sometimes the way in which we do polls can ensure that, in fact, we really are, right? So there are a couple ways, these biases that I've listed down here that were um, in the video lecture for Unit B. You can have the bias of small samples or the fallacy of small samples, selection bias, self-selection bias, non-response bias, landline bias, um, this respondent deception bias, which is also sometimes called social desirability bias, and context and order bias. So I'm just going to run through an idea that basically just do this part one of your weekly assignment with a some policy that I'm thinking about, which is graduate student unionization, adjunct faculty unionization. Right, it's a big hot button issue right now on a lot of campuses. So let's talk about some ways that I could poll in such a way that I could make it likely that graduate student unionization seems like a very popular idea or seems like a very unpopular idea. Right. So one way I can do this is through selection, through a way of choosing who responds to my poll or making it likely that only certain groups respond to my poll. Right. So we might think that if I want um, grad student unionization to look better, to look like it's more popular, then I might post the link to my online poll in a bunch of graduate student offices around campus. Sure, I mean, graduate students, if you think that they're generally in favor of unionization, making sure that they have the easiest availability to respond to the poll makes it more likely that, they'll that I'll get a response that looks like it's very popular. On the other hand, if I posted it only in administrative buildings where graduate students never go and administration tends to be less into the idea of graduate student unionization, then it's likely that I would get a very kind of negative results on my poll. Another way we could do this is not through putting it in an obviously biased place, but maybe posting it in the like in the campus newspaper. Um, because if you post it in a campus newspaper, a lot of people are just going to pass right by it. But people who are really interested in that idea, that topic, such as grad students and who have a strong opinion about it, will essentially self-select. Right, that's the self-selection bias. They'll be the ones who are motivated to respond. You know, that is if you know that graduate students read the campus newspaper, which I've never seen one in my life. Um, Another way that we can go about making this a biased poll in either direction is with the way that we kind of frame our questions, right? That's gets at some of this context and order bias. So we might, lead into that survey by saying things like, do you think workers should be able to represent themselves, right? That's the first question. And then the second question would be something like, do you think people who teach classes at UA are workers? And presumably, a lot of people would say yes to those first two. Then if you say, do you think graduate student workers, graduate TAs, should be able to unionize in order to represent themselves in labor disputes or something like that. Putting that question in that context makes it more likely for people to respond positively to it. And on the other side, you can say something like, uh, do you think it's fair that some unions are able to extract, unprofitable concessions from management, and then you do the same thing where you present biasing questions, uh, either in favor of the idea of unionization or against it, and then you present the graduate student unionization question after that, so that people are already biased to kind of go in one direction or another. So those are a couple ways that you can make your polls real biased. I look forward to seeing yours on Friday.